Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on? How you doing? Welcome to Talking Buffalo, part of the Blue Wire Network. I'm your host, Patrick Moran. Thank you very much for locking in, whether you're watching this on YouTube, whether you're listening to this on any of our audio platforms. I appreciate all you. This is dropping on Wednesday, back to a normal day. And as always, I am joined by my good buddy, Aaron Quinn from Cover One with that beautiful smile right there going on. What's going on, buddy? How you doing, man?
Good morning. I'm way behind on everything. I'm working on my sign here because I usually do my setups for your show here, and then I keep it mostly up for the week and do it for our show as well. And I didn't get my sign changed, and I let the kids mess around with it, and there were some like ridiculous scribbles and pictures on there, so I was cleaning it off. So I apologize for the delay this morning, but I'm here. We're back at it. It's the weather, dude. Like, I'm walking my kid to school now instead of driving them. I'm enjoying the weather a little bit, watering my grass. I'm behind the ball. I'm getting used to this new look Buffalo lifestyle.
I mean, you didn't uncover any stones last week, but you talked about how, this weather's going to turn sooner or later, and it's starting to now. And God, man, it's just I just feel like you come to life as the weather gets a little bit better, because it's just been just a goddamn gloomy ass spring. But anyway, so yeah. Aaron and I tape this in the morning. Aaron, takes his kids to school, and then we find that gap where we can squeeze this in. I say it all the time. So if anything crazy happens to happen sometime during the day on Tuesday, and you're listening to this on Wednesday, that is why we did not cover it today. The primary focus of this episode that I want to hit on are 5 things that, for me at least anyway, surprised me most about the Buffalo Bills offseason, the biggest developments that I thought were a surprise. So we'll spend some time talking about that. For that, though, Aaron, one thing that, we have a lot of things in common, but one thing that we definitely have in common is our love for music, specifically hip hop and, like 90s to maybe like earlier 2000s.
88 to like 2003, I think is your sweet spot for that.
It's funny. I talked, like, for an example, I'm in a Media Dynasty fantasy football league, and Bruce Nolan, we get going, and you know how Bruce is, man. He can really get going with those matches as we start talking football. You and I, I'd say probably half of our DM exchanges on a regular daily basis are like links to Spotify songs or just thoughts on music. You know what I'm saying? So I that's one of the things I love talking to you about.
One secret about me that maybe people on Twitter that follow me don't know is, if you talk to, there's a few people out there, and I think people would be surprised at who I just zip links to. It would be like 5 or 6 people that I just DM, and I'm that guy that just slides in people's DMs with Spotify links. And I don't care if you like it or not. Like, one of the biggest things that brings me the most joy in the world is sharing music with other people that they've never heard before, and then they enjoy it. It's like in food and music to me. Like, if you can share those with other people and it brings them joy, like that lights me up, dude. Like, that's the stuff that does it for me.
You send me a couple links from time to time of newer artists, because, I'm not really in today's music scene much, not necessarily brand new, but relatively new. Some that I really like that I've never heard before. Some I'm like, whatever. But I always like listening to new stuff. And I
think I've got your style pretty well. That's what I do. I find people's styles, and I'll hit them with stuff that I think, hey, this person will like that. And I think it's a good way with friends. Things that are really cool about music, Pat, we talk about a lot, is it's a way to share with friends, but also, like, the other day I was sharing you all those 90s songs. Nostalgia. Nothing rattles the drugs that come from nostalgia in my brain more than songs from growing up. Like, it'll bring me right back to sitting in my parents' car in 1992 with the window rolled down. Like, nothing does that. Songs and smells, and it can't really replicate smells the same way. So it really is fantastic, and I'll share it with you all the time, buddy.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. Music means so much to me. I had a birthday party last weekend, and set it up with the bar owner. Didn't ask him for any drink specials. Didn't ask for anything like that. The only thing I requested specifically that would have me bring all my friends to his bar and give him the business for my little birthday gathering was music. Wanted to have 80s music on. That was like my one demand. I was in an 80s music mood, very nostalgic. So anyway, let me ask you this, and then we'll jump into some Bill stuff. I got a lot of stuff I want to get to. But recently, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this last week, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 2023 inductees came out, and I'll just on the music side, I mean, there's performance, there's certain levels, but Kate Bush, Sheryl Crow, Missy Elliott, George Michael, Willie Nelson, Rage Against the Machine. I look at this list and I'm really happy for George Michael. It was a nice, pleasant surprise. And I was surprised that Missy Elliott got in. One group not on here, and I tweeted about this last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it might have been, and you had a pretty strong take on this too. One that I agreed with, A Tribe Called Quest, not on this list. You clearly think that they deserve to be in ahead of Missy Elliott. Got to elaborate on that for just a minute here.
So this is tough. And so one of the people that I share music with often, I don't know if your listeners or viewers here know Left Turn, the account Left Turn. They do Bill's graphics. They make prints for every game. They do a lot of t-shirts. It's like a culture brand. Mm-hmm. Great follow on Twitter and Instagram. Greg from there is a friend of mine, and we go back and forth, share a lot of music. It puts out fantastic Spotify playlists also, by the way. But we had this conversation at the same exact time you and I were talking about this, because he pushed back a little bit on me, and I don't disagree. My take on Missy Elliott getting in is a little bit twofold. One, it's just that her and Tribe sort of are going head to head. It's like if you had two special teams players going up for a Hall of Fame spot, and Steve Tasker is one and Devin Hester is the other. Like, who is it that's going to break through first, right? And my argument is Tribe, while not as probably successful in terms of overall record sales, and their career went a little short because they stopped making albums together and split a little bit and went off on other projects, where Missy was a solo act and was able to become a producer and maybe has a larger body of work and more record sales overall. So I can see the idea that she had a bigger impact, but I don't believe anyone at that time had a bigger impact on the shift in hip hop and R&B and the merging of hip hop and R&B and the induction of like jazz and some of these other things into hip hop. Because if people remember at the time, and I think you remember, Pat, heavy West Coast gangster, funkadelic, hip hop. East Coast was real gangster at the time. Like it was the rise of like who could talk about crack scene and the streets and those things, and that was fine, and there was a place for it, but there wasn't yet a really carved out niche for the other parts of the culture where it was more about positivity. And that's always been my favorite message out of hip hop, is like the positive hip hop. And they really brought that. They weren't the only ones, but there was this whole scene of the native tongues movement and the collection of some of the R&B artists at the time, Erykah Badu and The Roots. And they all started to kind of come from this, what Tribe really elevated to the scene. And they had really good commercial success as well. They just didn't continue on as well as Missy Elliott did. The argument I think Left Turn made that's best for Missy Elliott is hip hop is very much man's patriarchy world, where it is dominated by men, and women hadn't really broke through. You had MC Light, right? You had a couple of women that Queen Latifah had some popular success, but they never really were fully accepted, where Missy Elliott really had her own voice in the scene. In my comment I think I made was she kind of rode Timberland's coattails a little bit, because it's the same sound. And I can't be convinced that she didn't ride them a little bit, but she did take that and break through a glass ceiling. And so as being a woman and being the first woman in rap inducted, I think does matter. I think breaking those glass ceilings does matter, but I have a hard time as a person that believes that I'm a connoisseur of hip hop. I think Tribe had more of an impact on hip hop and the future sound of not just mainstream hip hop, but underground and R&B and the merging of those two worlds. You really saw it come to play after their rise to success. And I think they had more influence, and their fingerprint's still there.
Let's make this clear too. And I'm speaking for you here, but they're both deserving. You know, it's just, it's kind of like, say that cluster.
I love Missy.
Remember when it was like Andre Reed and Chris Carter, and it was like Tim Brown, like who's going to get in for it? Ultimately, they all get in. I feel like both are very deserving. I tend to agree with you. You know, again, growing up, being a little older than you too, and in the 80s, early 80s, hip hop was awesome. It was more about like, yo, I'm dope, I'm fresh, I'm fresher than you. I make the most money, I got the best shoes. Kind of like bragging a little bit, but like in fun. And then to your point, it really shifted to hardcore, more hardcore rap and stuff like that. They were a great bridge, man. I absolutely love Tribe Called Quest. big Missy Elliott fan as well. I like that hip hop is really starting to get its due. I don't have the list in front of me, but like I know.
I mean, the Super Bowl last year was
sure
all rap, hip hop, R&B, right? Like,
yeah, I'm just talking about like the Hall of Fame itself now.
Sure.
Like I know Run DMC's in there, I know LL's in there, Public Enemy's in there, Eminem's in there. So hip hop is really starting to turn the corner in terms of mainstream. And I know there's some people out there. In fact, I saw a couple of tweets bitching about it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not whatever. Just change the name of the music. Like no, it's still rock and roll is rock and roll, man. I don't.
And I think it still represents American music.
Yes,
Hall of Fame, right? Like in American music, rap's super big. The problem with these things, Pat, and this is an argument that you and I constantly have on our lists that we make, is music is super hard to define by popularity. And it isn't always like there's a lot of people that slip through the cracks that had huge influences on if you talk to any person that's like really into hip hop, like MF Doom should probably be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if you're going to start putting hip hop artists in there, but he probably will never, because he won't meet the criteria in terms of the record sales and the sold out shows and things like that other big artists had. And I don't think it's anywhere more prevalent than in hip hop that good artists don't buy into, maybe like punk rock, where they don't buy into the mainstream like record label and how things are supposed to be. Like there's more underground street hustle and grind guys, and some of them make it. Like Benny the Butcher came up that way and then he ends up on a big label, but most of them don't. And there's a lot of good ones that slip through the cracks. So I think it's tough to have those measures of success, because a lot of guys slip through the cracks that probably deserve their fair share. I'm sure there's an actual just hip hop Hall of Fame too that I just don't know about.
Well, and that's hip hop. And again, I was really pumped.
Shaka Khan, baby,
to see George Michael in there. You look at a couple of omissions, and there's always going to be omissions, just like with any Hall of Fame. You're like, well, how's this group or this person not in there? I think Cyndi Lauper is deserving, and she's not in. And on the rock side, and not that I'm really qualified to speak too much on like old school heavy metal, but Iron Maiden's still not in, and that's kind of again, I'm not
at least culturally, like I don't know much, but you see the shirts and stuff everywhere.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So anyway, that was this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The NFL schedule comes out, so we're dropping this Wednesday. In fact, some of the games we'll find out actually if you're listening to this on Wednesday today, including the Bills-London game officially.
Although, is it going to be delayed? They said some of the full release, maybe.
I think that's supposed to be, I believe, on Thursday night. I don't know if you saw this tweet, but there's some changes to rules. I want to pull up this tweet from Adam Schefter. Other changes to the schedule this season. The NFL will have a Black Friday game for the first time ever. That's going to be really weird.
Yeah.
I hope the Bills aren't playing on Black Friday.
I really think the NFL gets too greedy with this. I don't know what the tipping point is, but at some point people are going to just reject, because when you put these highlight one games on, you have more likelihood you're going to have a dud.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. What else do we got? Games don't necessarily belong to networks anymore. All games are free agents.
Okay, so no CBS with the AFC. Is that what that essentially means?
So AFC versus AFC is no guarantee that it's going to be on CBS. That's very weird. That's very weird.
Did we slip into an alternate reality?
I don't know.
That's going to feel like one of those Mandela effects where in like 5 years it's going to be like, do you guys remember when CBS had the AFC games? And people will be like, no, they didn't. They never had those.
Right. I agree 100%. So that is going to be weird. We waited for years and years. The Bills stunk, and it was like you would never get Jim Nantz and Tony Romo on a game. And now the Bills get them regularly, and people are like, oh, I can't wait to, maybe be on Fox and shit like that. So anyway, so that's a thing this year. Teams can be on Thursday Night Football twice. I hate that. And then the last one, not all teams are guaranteed to have a primetime spot.
Good.
I love that too, man. Who wants to watch Arizona Cardinals or the Tennessee Titans play on Monday night or Sunday Night Football, So
yeah. The only thing I will say then, the only problem I will have is, which I know they're going to do, is these big markets. The NFC East always comes to mind, where now they're a little bit more fun, so I won't mind it going in this year. I think there's better matchups. But there's been years throughout my life where the NFC East has just stunk. And it's been bad Thursday and primetime games like pretty regularly, probably more so than any other, because you have the Cowboys, you have these big market teams, the Giants, and everybody supposedly wants to watch them. I don't agree with that. When they're bad, don't put them in primetime. Like let the people watch them in the middle of the day.
I couldn't agree more. All right. So when it comes to the Bills in the NFL schedule, and I know a lot of people are like, and they'll say, why do you care about the schedule? You already know who they're playing, and you already know if it's going to be a home and a road game. And that is true. But the schedule still matters. And once it comes out, maybe next week, we'll have some thoughts. I'm sure, well, depending on when you and Greg tape, I don't think the schedule actually would be out for that week. But I'm sure you guys will have plenty of thoughts too. But it does matter to some extent when you start to break down the schedule, because you'll notice, like, sometimes a team will be coming in on extra rest, or you'll be playing short weeks. So there are times in the schedule where even if you know where you're playing, you just don't know when. It does matter. And for the Bills playing in London this year, I'm not sure if you saw this, but the stadium in London that they're playing at, it escapes me. I can't think of the name of the stadium right now, but they put tickets on sale, or they put out a thing for tickets.
Yeah.
And it's October 8th. You saw that, right?
I saw something that.
Yeah. Well, the Bills game's expected to be October 8th. You're listening to this on Wednesday morning, very likely, or maybe late Tuesday on YouTube. You'll know Wednesday when the Bills are playing in London, because they're announcing the London games on Wednesday. So this will be official, but sure sounds like they're playing October 8th, which this part I don't like. And I want to get a thought from you on this, because what that means is that they're playing in week 5. And what that means is that after you play in London, you're pretty much guaranteed to be getting a bye after that London game. So that means the Bills' bye this year is going to be in week 6.
Okay.
How do you feel about that? Having a bye week, that's pretty damn early, man. How do you feel about that?
It's early. I mean, they had an early one last year too, right? After week 6.
Can't remember.
It was early last year as well. I mean, it's going to happen.
Right.
Here's
Trey was supposed to come back last year after the bye, but
it was kind of really good timing for Josh's injury. Like, it bought him a little time.
That's right.
During that period of time, it was like, oh, if we can just get to that bye, right? And sometimes you deal with that, where I don't know. It's the luck of the draw. My thing on schedules in general is, I think it's good once they're out. My problems with the schedule release stuff is NFL is crazy and we're full of wacky fanatics, and the predicting schedules isn't for me. The hunting down investigative leads to like piece together the schedule isn't for me. If that's for you, no, I'm not knocking you at all.
Sure.
I only care about the schedule when it comes out. I have no control over when those games are going to be. I will discuss it with Greg after the fact. I'll come on and talk to you after the fact. Predicting games isn't for me at this point. Like, I think that's dumb. Predicting rosters.
That's
like,
for Howard Simon.
He's cool. That's fine what he does. Like, he does it also. He aggregates a full season and they keep track of it. And it's a shtick at this point. It's so cool. But for me, I'm not going to just start like, okay, now that the schedule's out, I see 13-3. Like, stuff like that is what bothers me. I think there's a conversation in here to be had about, like you're saying, like, logistically, how do these games line up travel wise? How does this stuff line up? What do the Bills have to look out for? How do they have to manage their roster to make it through that second? If they are having to buy there, what does the roster look like and how are they managing that?
Playing Miami so early last year on a Sunday at 1:00 affected them physically. The weather was absolutely a big factor in that game too. So
huge. Yeah.
So it does matter. It's just, it's beyond your control, and you're going to have to play these teams one way or the other. But so anyway,
sure.
we'll find that out, and maybe we'll have a couple thoughts next week. Nothing big, and plus it'll be old news by the time we get together next week. All right, so this offseason, it's been an interesting offseason. I don't know if it's been the most memorable, but there's been some things, I think anyway, that have surprised me, and I wanted to kind of go through my top 5 things.
Okay.
And I don't know if these are necessarily in order. They're just 5 specific things that have
5 random thoughts
me.
from Pat.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And I want to get your thoughts on them. The biggest one, and I think you would agree that this is probably, if not one, certainly one of the 2 biggest developments this offseason. And that's Jordan Poyer re-signing with the Buffalo Bills. Because I'm going to tell you right now, dude, we spent some time getting ready for the offseason, talking about, is Tremaine staying? Is Tremaine going? And we kind of landed maybe around 50-50. I wasn't surprised at all that he signed somewhere else and got paid. But I think, at least I did. I can't speak for you, so I won't. But it was a formality to me that Jordan Poyer was going elsewhere, based on maybe some comments he had on his podcast, based certainly on a lot of things that his wife was tweeting about and stuff like that on Twitter, based on what we thought the market would be. Miami and Vegas and Dallas, lots of teams that appeared to have interest in him that were looking for his safety. But as it turns out, their market never really materialized for him. And long story short, which I think is a very good thing for the Bills, this is a surprisingly pleasant offseason development, at least as far as I'm concerned. But Jordan Poyer re-signed with the Buffalo Bills. That was surprising to you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. In hindsight, We probably should have had a higher likelihood. We always talked about it on our show as like, hey, there's a real chance here this market dries up, right? When you add up the optics of Jordan Poyer, when you take out, like, we're fans of the Bills, we understand the situation, who Jordan Poyer is, we understand where he came from, the type of snaps and the workload he had on his body when he got here, what he's been able to do since he's been here, sort of the freak injuries he dealt with last year and playing with some low tier 4, 5, 6 level safeties and trying to piece that together. And I think a lot of people conflated that recency bias with like, hey, Jordan Poyer is starting to decline and he's a declining asset. And I think that was real in the league. And you add up his age and you add up the injuries, and then you take that little bucket and you add it to these optics of, yeah, on his podcast, he talked about, although I do think it was maybe taken a little out of context, this idea that the taxes in New York, he openly talked about that. And I think the question was raised to him, like, where, if it's not back with the Buffalo Bills, like that's off the table, where would you want to go? And he just said, hey, like maybe somewhere where the tax burden isn't so high. And I hate when players talk about taxes, but at the same time, like he wasn't shitting on the Bills or ruling out the Bills. I think that got taken too far. But the optics lined up, the tweets, her continuously talking about and retweeting Miami Dolphins fans begging for him, which makes sense. Like if it's a loved one, they don't have loyalty to the team. They have loyalty to getting what's best for their loved one and their family. So optics didn't line up really great for him. And I think it was true in the league and in the market. And you saw safety get real top end like we saw, and the value wasn't there in free agency. And so he sort of missed out on the opportunity. The salary cap is real. Probably some teams that maybe were interested just couldn't really get to a level where the Bills still could, even with the cap. And yeah, to your point, in terms of the biggest return, not getting Tremaine Edmonds back, but being able to get Jordan Poyer back is a huge win for this team, because you could, in my opinion, you couldn't survive that type of gashing up the middle of your defense with Tremaine and Poyer and having to replace that. It's going to be a big lift to replace what they were doing in this defense with Tremaine Edmonds. I think they can get through it, but that's going to be a big task this season that a lot of energy and effort is going to be on. Not having to do that also at safety, I can't tell you how big of a win that is for the Bills to not have to focus on that. And now it sounds like they've given themselves a little cushion. You've gotten Taylor Rapp in here on a 1-year deal. You might be able to extend him to the future. That could be part of your future at safety. And now you've also got DeMar Hamlin coming back from injury. And I wouldn't bet against him. I think he's a good player and can be a future role of what Jordan Poyer offered. So you might really be able to roll into a transition where, dude, 3 months ago, we were nervous about what is the future of this position. We weren't even sure. We're not sure how Micah Hyde's going to come back. And is Jordan Poyer going to be here? Who's going to be that safety? Now I think there's a little bit flush at the safety position, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
In a 2-month turnaround.
Back near the end of last year, and you got Jaquan Johnson and you got Dean Marlowe and you got Cam Lewis in the mix. So yeah, the upgrade is significant.
And maybe Christian Benford can be a hybrid back and forth. Like we might even get more flush this summer.
Sure. And I'm not hating on Rachel Bush at all for a lot of her tweets during the off season. That's her husband. It's her man. And, fans from other teams were clamoring for Jordan, and she was kind of playing that flirtatious game, with
her fault. Her
and stuff.
Issue right now is also optics, though, of like she has so much like blocking Bills fans and going at it with Bills fans, whether right or wrong, whoever's in the right or wrong. There's so much.
Her politics could be a turnoff to some, for sure. Half the country, for sure.
Totally. So I don't think there's anything she can say now that's good. Like there's a 65% of the Bills fan base that is just going to be turned off or take it the wrong way, no matter what it is she says at this point.
100%. And you know what? When you, for better or for worse, when you take a strong political stance and you're open about it, whether it's the right, whether it's the left, it's just the way it goes, bro. You can say goodbye to half your fans because half of them are going to not stand you. That's just the world that we live in today. One final thing about Jordan Poyer. I think he was disappointed that the market wasn't more, at the end of the day. But when it's all said and done, I feel like Jordan Poyer is very happy to be back in Buffalo. I feel like he likes playing, and maybe he doesn't love living in New York State. He certainly doesn't love the taxes. Maybe he doesn't like the weather. There's things about Western New York certainly to not like. But one thing I think he's always enjoyed playing for this organization, loves his teammates. I think he's a great player on the field. I think he's a good asset off the field. He does a lot of stuff off the field. He's talked openly about problems with alcoholism. I think he's inspired a lot of people in this community, and he's doing a lot of stuff now. I just seen he won an award for something mental health recently. So, props to him. I think he's a good dude, and I think he's genuinely happy to be back playing football, at least in Buffalo.
Jordan's a great dude. He's a really nice person.
Agreed.
He's been very accessible to us at Cover One, whether it's asking him about just certain things and talking to him. He's always reached back out. I've done graphics for him and stuff. He's just a nice guy. He really is. And he's always been accessible, not just us, the Bills fans in general. I've seen him doing community events and doing different things. And he's always around doing that stuff. The Bills are lucky to have him back. Here's the reality of it, Pat. It's a business. He had an opportunity. His career lined up in a little bit of a weird way, right? He really had a battle to even get on roster spots early, special teams guy, big devastating injury in Cleveland, coaching staff shifts up. He gets drawn from a coach that knew him in Cleveland, brought him to Buffalo. Really happenstance that Sean McDermott happens to be this just ended up being a really great fit. He cashed in a little bit, but this was an opportunity. He developed into his prime so late as a player that didn't line up as it normally does for guys to cash in on that second contract in a big way. And he played into that second contract at that all-pro level where you would cash in early. And so it just didn't line up now where he happened to get those injuries late in his career that look worse than they probably were to people. He looked like a bit of damaged goods, I think, in the market. And I don't think it's true. And so the Bills lucked out here. But if you can't get the money, if you go on free agency, the next best thing is, finishing what you started and doing it with your friends. Like, he's absolutely happy to be back here. There isn't a better situation in the NFL. And I think he knew that. It was, I have this one last opportunity to cash in. I would really like to do that. And I'm never going to fault a player or blame him for that type of thing. The team is going to do that too.
Especially in the NFL, dude, where a lot of the money, except for what's guaranteed, none of it's guaranteed aside from that. They'll cut you and not think twice, man.
I am sure that he knew that the Bills treated him as an asset even last year as he was playing hurt. I'm sure there was pressure for him to get on the field and be treated like an asset. This is a business, man. Yeah, the team will cut you without even blinking an eye. If you have an opportunity to get money, you got to go try to do it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. All right, so the next thing is I have a graphic if you're watching on the video side of Tremaine Edmunds leaving, but that's not a surprise to me. I thought it was always 50-50. The Bills were going to have a hard time coming up with, the money that Tremaine Edmunds was going to get on the open market. This was just a guy who was still young, still ascending, hitting free agency at the perfect time, and he got his money in Chicago. Good for him. What is surprising to me, though, Aaron, is that this team really has done nothing externally anyway, nothing literally to try to replace him. It certainly looks like now we're going into training camp soon. And the Bills they'll keep their eye on the waiver wire in the summer. Sure. Who knows? A trade could pop up out of nowhere. You never know in the NFL. But as of right now, you're certainly looking at incumbents. AJ Klein, Terrell Dodson, maybe second-year guy, Terrell Bernard, maybe even Balin Spector might be in the mix. But it's a surprising development to me. Not that the Bills necessarily lost Tremaine Edmunds, but that they didn't go try to get a stopgap guy, a veteran from around the league, a name guy to fill in for maybe 1 or 2 years and draft young and kind of start over. So that was surprising to me.
A little bit. The only thing I will say about this is it just, I think, lined up really poorly for the Bills this year, because I think the plan was to try to keep Edmunds. I think they had probably a reasonably competitive offer here. The problem is you had a team, the Chicago Bears, that run similar concepts and philosophy to their defense. Eberflus very much like Sean McDermott, in my opinion. And he saw the vision exactly as the Bills saw it for Tremaine Edmunds, and Chicago has a ton of money. And they're in a different position in their team. They're where the Bills were years ago, where you're flush with cash, you got some draft picks, you got to rebuild with a young QB. It made sense for them to go a little bit more all in than the Bills were going to be able to do. So that didn't line up well for the Bills. The other thing that didn't line up is free agency class was not very good for replacing linebackers. We do know the Bills at least reached out to Levante David. We don't know the extent of the interest or if an offer was made or anything like that, but they at least had those conversations. I'm expecting there were more. I'm sure they were in on other players, but I don't know the level of interest based on there wasn't a high quality of talent outside of Levante David. Really, I know a lot of people like Bobby Wagner. There's a huge decline for him there. And then you go to the draft. And again, I think they were unlucky in that a year that they lost their middle linebacker freak athlete. There's really only one to replace. So people can talk about Drew Sanders. People can talk about Trent Simpson. I kind of don't want to hear that was like an acceptable level of replacement. Whether or not Detroit went way too high on Jack Campbell or not, we can debate that all we want. But the fact is somebody in the NFL viewed him as a first round grade, and they gave him a first round talent on it. And the Bills never even got the opportunity to make that decision. So I don't know if they would have been in on that player to try to replace Tremaine. But now what we do know, with all those things that didn't line up good for the Bills to get to this void at middle linebacker, you still did make some investment. I don't think that the argument could be made that there's been nothing done to fill this gap, because you did make a third round pick in Terrell Bernard last year. Whether or not that was for a future Milano replacement, he did play some middle linebacker in the preseason, so they were prepping some of that role, even if it was just rotational. But that's a third round pick. That's significant. Then you did it again. You went and did it again this year with another third round pick. So that's back-to-back third round picks. That's not a high-end investment. You're not replacing him with the same type of investment you made in that position previously, but it's not nothing, right? And sure, Balin Spector is a low round pick, but that's not that. You have 3 recent draft picks, development, prospect, time, energy that you're putting in on this. All I can think of is the Nate Geary, the time, the energy rant yelling about me. But it's true though. You have to think of these things as asset allocation, and they have some assets in this room, including a veteran incline, that they're going to try to piece something together. And it's not going to be perfect, but I don't think they didn't do anything here.
I'm glad. Sorry for the rant. No. I'm glad you're right about Jack Campbell. We'll never know, what the Bills' level of interest is. I am very happy that Drew Sanders was available in round 2, because that puts to bed, there was a lot of talk that there's probably 2 linebackers maybe that are potential starting middle linebackers in the NFL. He ends up going round 2 to Denver, Drew Sanders.
And maybe he'll be good.
Yeah, maybe he will be. But I like the fact that the Bills had a crack at him. So if they wanted him, he was theirs. And instead, they took the guard, Osiris Torrance. So I'm kind of glad. Well, it's going to be this summer, and tons of time to talk about what's coming up this summer, but it's going to be one of the more intriguing, not just roster battle positions in camp, but also just schematically what they might be doing, if they're going to be doing something different.
I am... To start free agency, I was really thought they'd get Tremaine back, so I didn't think about a ton. When they lost Tremaine, I was so scared and nervous about what was going to happen to this defense. Today, going into camp, I think I'm more excited about how it'll play out than I am nervous. If that's fair. I think that's fair, that I'm more excited about, hey, can one of these guys get to the higher end of their athleticism?
All right, I am back here with Aaron Quinn from Cover One. All right, so we've covered 2. The third one to me that was surprising, and I'm just going to be blunt. This isn't a pleasant surprise, but the Bills have done a lot. They've added at wide receiver. They took a tight end in the first round. They've really solidified the interior of the offensive line. They signed Poona Ford last week, I think, which is a great addition to the defensive line. They bring back their safeties. So there's a lot of positive developments here. The one thing that does surprise me with the Bills on the offense that I'm not personally a fan of is Spencer Brown not being offered, at least as things stand today. No, I don't even want to say no real competition. No competition, period. Because David Quisenberry is not going into camp and winning the starting right tackle job. It's just not going to happen. So essentially the Bills have handed Spencer Brown the starting right tackle job for 2023. And now we've heard Brandon Beane talk about multiple times during the offseason. Maybe this shouldn't be a surprise, especially if you took Brandon Beane at his word. I'm surprised and like I said, a little bit disappointed. If there was one thing the Bills did in the draft that I really hated with this pick of Dorian Williams, it's not that I hate Dorian Williams, the football player. Maybe he turns out to be something. I'd love to be wrong, but I see the Kansas City Chiefs literally the next pick trade up and go get an offensive tackle, Wanya Morris. I hate the fact that the Bills, long story short here, I'm rambling, that the Bills did pretty much nothing to even offer legitimate, adequate competition for Spencer Brown going into camp. I don't like that.
I'm with you. It was a spot that really post free agency. I didn't see an answer for that type of competition in free agency again. I thought this was a weak class. I like this draft class though, and I thought it ran a little bit deep into those 3rd, 4th round picks where you could get a guy that could at least push. Coming to be a young competition that could at least, hey, we got a developmental guy that at least if Spencer Brown doesn't work out, we got a plan for next year. We got something in house. That's more my concern is I'm fine with them being a little higher on Spencer Brown than I am. I don't, if there's a one flaw of Bean that I'm really frustrated with, it's been their overall philosophy in the offensive line, how they've put together offensive lines. Like, I will give them credit. I think they address the interior offensive line in the more meaningful way than they've done since I've been following, covering this team. That's been one I think nobody probably benefited more from free agency than Mitch Morse. I think that, he finally got some decent level starter players next to him that maybe he'll have a good season there.
Agreed.
I also, my football philosophy has always been, I say this all the time on our show, Pat, that, I believe you can have one weak link. I do. I think you can hide that. You can send help. You can chip. You can do some things. The Bills' problem has been they've had 2 to 3 leaky spots on this offensive line over the last year and a half. And so if the interior offensive line really is addressed the way that I think it is, I think that's going to help the Spencer Brown project a little bit. I'm going to give Bean some of the benefit of the doubt, knowing the medicals a little bit more, and say that the way his athleticism shows up and presents itself on film, the lack of things that I'm seeing maybe is from the back injury and maybe from the recovery and the surgery. But for the way he plays and the height he is and the way he lacks getting pad level against real good edge rushers, I don't think that's a problem that can get fixed. If it was the back injury, I'll concede that hopefully this year, but I have some concerns just about his size and frame and the way he plays with it, that I don't think he's the prospect they think he is. I think Bean's missed on some of this stuff. Obviously, the Wyatt Teller trade does not look good in hindsight for them. And they've just, Cody Ford, the investment there, I think when I heard Brandon Bean talking about Spencer Brown, a couple of red flags went up in my head about the same kind of way he was talking about Cody Ford. And maybe this is kind of a Achilles heel of their scouting and their process is getting the right guys in place. I still believe Aaron Kromer's a really good coach and he can work some of this in and get the best out of these guys. So this is the big year. And you're right. They didn't do enough to address it. So there's a lot of pressure. You look at the middle linebacker position on the defensive side of the ball, that's going to be the story all camp. Spencer Brown and his development, I don't know that there's a bigger spotlight on this team and on this offense than the right tackle position.
It's such an important position. And I want to be clear too. I'm not throwing in the towel. I'm not done with Spencer Brown. I
want him to work out, right?
Sure,
that's
of course.
Best case scenario.
And to some extent, I will put some stock and give, like you said, of some benefit of the doubt to Brandon Bean here. But like when you look at the interior of the offensive line, as things stand right now, the way it's probably going to play out, you got Ryan Bates, Edwards, and Bacher. None of them are starters. That's good. That's a good thing. That's pretty good goddamn depth in the inside. Let's remember last year, like that Miami game, you got Greg Van Roten playing critical snaps, stuff like that. You don't want to see that. But now you look at the tackle position. I'm not inspired at all by David Quisenberry. And I hope I'm wrong, but I haven't even mentioned Tommy Doyle. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really seen anything that's going to give me a lot of faith in Tommy Doyle. I'm surprised that the Bills didn't do more to address right tackle, and they did a hell of a lot to address the interior, which is great, and I do like that. Just wish they would have did something.
I get it, but I do think there's a point where we have to, again, frame this in the reality of how the NFL exists. Like, the way the NFL is structured is you can't do it all. They don't want teams to be complete, and there has never been a team in the history of football, even those Patriots that went 18-1, that went into training camp and went into a season where the fan base wasn't concerned about a position or had something. Like, we're really pinpointed on a couple of spots where it's like, man, I'm a little concerned here. Can this work out here? It's not the end of the world. Here's another way to frame it too, man. I do think people should look at, and I'll try to share it with you so you can put it in the show notes. I forget who did it. They did a chart of, like, I think it was based on PFF grades and ESPN win rate, which I don't love those, but we can talk about that again. But that's an aggregate of good enough data where you can compare. And right tackle was by far the weakest position across the league, really. And if you look at the AFC East, it's not much better than what the Bills had. Like, as worried as we are about Spencer Brown, he's still got, he displays upside, that there's some value there. We had Joe Marino on, and I told him, I'm not on Spencer Brown. You got to tell him, you got to sell me on it. he didn't sell me on it, but the best case he made was like, yeah, it's bad, but it's not as bad as everyone else. Like, like there's a right tackle play in the NFL is not great.
It's kind of like when people who bitch that Gabe Davis is not a good number 2 receiver. It's like, all right, we'll go look at all the number 2 receivers around the league and then come back and tell me that same thing. I get that. And you're also right too. You can't address every single thing. So sure, if they go get a solid quality depth right tackle or swing tackle, let's say that, maybe that comes at the expense of not being able to sign Poona Ford. No, or maybe you don't go get Deontay
maybe
Hardy.
Ryan Bates is your good swing tackle.
I said that last week. You want to talk about a potential future episode where we're talking about training camp surprises. Maybe Ryan Bates ends up playing some offensive tackle, and maybe we see him if he can work out a right tackle. I wouldn't completely write it off. I wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't completely write it off either.
If he's not that, like that's probably the high end worst case scenario if he doesn't win the position early on. The other great position the Bills are in with this offensive line is if he's your just backup swing player, that is so versatile for game day decisions where you have a guy that can snap the ball and all the way through to play tackle. Like then you end up in that Miami game and you have so much versatility.
I love it
going into it. That's a real plus in the NFL. I think offensive lineman number 6 is a sneaky new value position along the league because there's just not a lot of offensive linemen. If you can have one that plays multiple positions, man, it buys you so much flexibility.
I couldn't agree more. And that's part of the reason why I was a big fan of them drafting Osiris Torrance, because that very likely is going to make Ryan Bates that guy. All right. So
Swiss Army knife. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And we got 2 more. All right. And we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about these 2, in part because these were stories that we've covered on this podcast before, but one of them was Leslie Frazier departing. Not so much that Leslie Frazier left. Like if you would have told me after that Cincinnati game that Leslie Frazier wouldn't be back this year, I would have been like, all right, well, I'm not really all that surprised. The surprising thing was that he left in February. You know, that was late in the year. So that doesn't surprise me at all. And then the other thing is the Bills just taking a tight end in the first round. It's funny, you know, you and I do this 6-week mock draft series. And, you know, we play the board the way it turns out, and we just always seem to have a really good offensive tackle available for us in the first round. We took wide receiver a few of the times. I think 99% of people who were doing the same things that we were doing were thinking along the same way. Mm-hmm. Bottom line is tight end was not talked about much at all as a possibility for the Bills, but the way the board played out, the tackles are gone. That wide receiver run 4 straight from 20 through 23. As you know, Jack Campbell gone. There weren't a lot of options out there, and the Bills ended up taking a tight end, which, you know, and we've said this, he's not just really a tight end. He's a big slot receiver. He's going to do a lot of things. I hate strapping the word just tight end on him because it feels like it shortchanges him, but it's certainly, and we'll see how it plays out, Aaron, but it is certainly surprising. Well, it's surprising now.
Yeah, it's surprising in hindsight. Again, we keep saying that, but and again, the problem with this one is it doesn't fit cleanly into a box, and that just makes it really hard to have a conversation about this on Twitter, because for some folks, if things don't fit real clean, there's too much unknown, and that's uncomfortable, and they don't like the unknown. For me, both these things wrap into what I think I'm most excited about for this offseason, which when we ended the season, the way it ended, my biggest takeaway was there's some real structural changes that I need to see from both sides of the ball from the coaches. Like they can add whatever they want for talent. I think they got enough. My thing was you can run it back. If you get the coaches to do the things that I think are necessary, you have the talent. I don't think the lack of talent has ever been the issue the last couple of years. I think the progress of the coaches and the development of some of what they do has been an issue. I can give Ken Dorsey a little bit of leeway of being a first-time play caller. There's that. Leslie Frazier, as much as I've advocated for him, and I still think he's a really great coach. I really do. I think that his career, when you put him on par with, oh my God, man, I'm drawing a brain fart of what's his name from Miami now, the other old coach. Jesus, I'm having a brain fart. Fangio. When you put him on par with Fangio, I think that they're very similar coaches, and they've had very similar success in the NFL. They're just perceived differently. But the way this team performed against Cincinnati, it was an overcoaching of a defense where they tried to put players in positions, and I think they overcoached and didn't let players play fast. And you saw it play out in a team that was just playing slow against a team that was picking them apart playing fast. And that to me was enough to have that moving on from Leslie. I would have been fine if he came back, but okay, I'm ranting here. Long story short, both of these connect to me because it talks about a real philosophical change that I think that has to come. The Bills are now forced to make. Sean McDermott's calling the plays. He calls games different than Leslie Frazier has historically. We're forced to move on from Tremaine Edmonds. Things are going to change fundamentally about how this defense operates. I think that's a good thing. I think they needed a forced change to shock the system, do some different things, put it out there. Offensively, getting this type of personnel, the wide receiver, hybrid tight end, and using that type of asset on them is going to force some change. And I think people are saying, and I'm one of them, that, Dorsey has to prove that he can use these types of things. And will he do 12 personnel? Eric Turner's gone back at their Shula and Dorsey's days in Carolina and shown that they were highly using 12 personnel. And that's kind of where their offensive philosophies are rooted in. They just didn't have it last year. And so now they have the tools. You have to assume that philosophical change is coming. They've gotten bigger, whether they wanted to or not, with Torrance. That's going to present a more physical aspect to this game. Latavius Murray being a signing right after. Like, they're showing signs that on both offense and defense, this is going to be a very different looking team. And I do think it was needed. So I think both these final stories, you said maybe these aren't that big, but to me, it's the most exciting part of this offseason is we have a lot of guesses. I think Eric's guesses are probably the closest to right about what these things are going to look like, but we really don't know until we see it. And I don't know if we'll see it even this summer. It might not be something till the season really ramps up to what we see the offense and defense philosophies can be. But I'm the most excited about that because I think that's what's going to be the thing that gets the Buffalo Bills over the hump to being up there with Kansas City. I think they've been out coached at times in those bigger moments up with the Bengals. And so this is the move that might have needed to happen to get there.
I'm going to be honest with you, man. I like Dalton Kincaid, and I didn't talk about him much during our 6-week series because I just didn't think the Bills there was any way they were going to take a tight end in the first round. But I read about him. I knew about him. I watched some of his highlights and stuff on YouTube. I read about the Travis Kelce traits, being kind of traitsy like him along those lines. I just didn't think that it was something that would happen. I think we covered everything. No, that were like surprises. Maybe Damar Hamlin coming back, already announcing that he's going to play again. That might be a little bit of a surprise, but not a complete surprise.
No.
If you know him a little, I'm not that I know him, but people who do, it's like if he could play, he was going to, and he's going to give it a go. So, that's good. But we pretty much covered everything. There was there's lots of developments. We could spend hours talking about them, but ones that maybe were surprising, I'm pretty sure that
not Bill centric,
right?
I can think of now.
All right, well, let's finish up. We haven't been able to do this in a while because of our mock draft series for 6 weeks, but we played this little game called Finish the Sentence, and I got 5 for you this week. And I say this all the time, and this is just an opportunity to kind of kick back and chill a little bit, give fans who are listening or watching the show maybe a little more insight to you as a person beyond just talking Buffalo Bills and football. So I throw together some random questions. I put together a sentence, and simply put, you're just going to finish it, and then I will as well. So let's get this going. The first one, and again, we got 5. The first one today, a movie you watched as a kid that scared you and or caused nightmares is blank.
I think this is probably very common. I think a lot of people are going to also have this one. It by Stephen King. Yeah, I don't.
Okay. Yeah.
The clown movie. I think believe I'm remembering this right. I got to go look it up. What year it came on? It was a big deal. It was on like primetime Sunday TV back-to-back weeks or something. And I remember it being a big deal because I was pretty young, and they were like, hey, there's like kid violence in this. You probably shouldn't let your kids watch this. My brother was older, and so I was watching it with him. That mother swear word insert there. Dude, he's like 6 years older than me. So I think he was like 12 or 13 at the time. He spent the whole summer, me and my little friends that were like little kindergarten, whatever, maybe second grader kids, and was just scaring the shit out of us. Be like, oh, I saw a balloon on the way past that whatever sewer drain the other day. Like I wouldn't go near there. And my friends and I, we wouldn't go near sewer drains. We were like refusing to shower. Our poor parents, like we just wouldn't go near any drains. There was a fire in the woods once, and he's like, "Oh, that's where the clown lives, out in the woods or something like that." Dude, it like ruined our summer. So terrorizing that movie, and I haven't even watched the new one because clowns, I just don't even. It ruined me once. I don't need it ever again.
I'm going to go to 1986 for my pick. I don't even know if you've ever seen it. Witchboard.
No.
Fucking scared the shit out of me.
How old were you in 86?
It made me, do I got to be honest with you? 14, going on 15.
Yeah.
It made me never want to be anywhere in the vicinity of a Ouija board ever.
Ugh,
so
yeah.
That movie scared me. And then the original, I was a very, very young kid, but the original Halloween too scared me. I remember
I've never seen
on my
them.
Couch. Really?
Dude, I hate scary movies. I straight up don't.
I'm not a fan either.
I don't like violence at all in any. I don't like UFC. I like football is as violent as my life gets.
I tell you what, dude, I'm the same way when it comes to like new age scary movies. I barely watch them. My son is like obsessed with watching them with his girlfriend. I'm like, why? For what? They're not for me either. But going back to when I was a kid, I watched some, and Witchboard scared the shit out of me. All right, next one up. Something I just can't understand the popularity of is.
Well, it should be scary movies. I didn't think about it, but no.
You could have just answered it right there.
Yeah, I know people that love them. I'm going to say my answer is network television. Like Big Bang Theory, like I used to like network TV when it was really like the only game in town, but there's just so much good content out there that's just readily available and accessible. And I don't know, anytime I see a network TV show and people like, you got to watch this, it almost always certainly falls flat. I think like The Office, Parks and Rec, like those are the exceptions to the rules with that, but it's more garbage than not. And it's just repetitive cookie cutter. They keep throwing the same stuff at people and people just gobble it up.
I can't. I was thinking about this the other day. I didn't know what you were going to answer. I can't think of the last like really network TV show aside from I watched This Is Us on NBC that I got into that was actually on a regular network. Mine is a TV show, but more I'm being specific here, and you'll agree with me because I guess the question is something you don't understand the popularity of. I'm sure you hear a lot about it or read a lot about it on Twitter, but I know you don't watch it. Succession, that show on HBO.
We might fire it up here soon.
Well,
it's so mixed. It seems like the most polarizing show because my wife was like, oh, people are talking about it at work, and it was like 50-50. People are like, oh, that show sucks, or some people love it. And I see it on Twitter, and everyone I've talked to, I've gotten the same reaction, 50-50. So I'm intrigued. I don't know. I watched the first episode. The first episode sucked. We watched it a while back. It was terrible.
And I'll tell you this. So the writing is good. The dialogue is good. I'm going to give them credit for that. It's exceptional writing, exceptional dialogue. It's just boring, and it's tough to get into a show. Well, it's been boring. The last season's heating up, though. I'll give it credit. But overall, it's been a boring show. It moves at a snail's pace, and literally every single character on the entire show is utterly unlikable. Like, don't even have redeeming traits either. They're all 100% unlikable. And it's exhausting getting in a show where you don't have nobody to root for at all. Nobody. There's no good guy, bad guy. They're all bad guys. It's just about greed, family, power, money, all that stuff. I don't know. Anyway, to your point, I've seen people saying this is the greatest TV show of all time. It's not. Not to me, it's not. So anyway, I'm answering the question by saying I personally don't understand the popularity of it. All right, let's move on to the next one. Something I thought was a rich people thing when I was a kid is blank.
HBO and like pay-per-view, getting pay-per-view stuff.
Okay.
Like my parents are very working class. We just there was no extra. We had cable, right? When internet came out, we got internet, but we didn't get like any extra stuff. And my dad would like all the WWE stuff. We would watch it a week later. He had a guy at the shipyard that he worked at that would buy the pay-per-view. Like everyone would give him $5 or whatever, and they would get a VHS recording of it like a week later. And so thank God the internet didn't exist during all those years growing up where I was watching WrestleMania a week or two after the fact. But yeah, no. And I remember the one time my dad, my old man, big boxing fan. He used to box growing up, like loved it back in the 60s, 70s. and he bought the Tyson Holyfield fight on pay-per-view. We got the box. He went out and got everything and set it all up. And I've never seen him so pissed. I wish I had like a cell phone and stuff to record him yelling at Mike Tyson for like wasting his money on that fight. Because we sat around all that was supposed to be the biggest. I mean, that fight, the billing, people only think about him biting the ear, but that was supposed to be like, these two are the top pinnacle of boxing going at it. And he was pissed, dude. HBO, having HBO's rich people stuff back then.
I got two, and maybe this first one might be us having like a decade gap in age. Maybe that's part of the reason. It was more common maybe when you were a kid, but when I was a kid, golf. Nobody played golf in the West Side. I grew up on the West Side of Buffalo. Ain't nobody played golf. I didn't know anybody who had golf clubs. Golf just felt like a privileged rich person sport that poor people, average people didn't play. I certainly didn't, and none of my friends did either. Then the other thing, this is going to sound dumb, but this was in my house anyway. You're talking about, HBO is kind of like your house. My house with chicken wings. Dude, when I grew up, everybody had chicken wings. We never got chicken wings. I never had chicken wings growing up. Like my mother and my father would get pizza. Like we'd have pizza night, but they never splurged for the wings. Yeah. So I was like, we could afford wings.
Appetizers was going to be my runner up, because if we went to a restaurant as a family and I was like, yo, can we get mozzarella sticks? Absolutely. Unless it was like graduation or something, like you did something real special, you're not getting an appetizer, bro. And I will say though about golf, the age gap, I don't think it's was different when I started at a young age, but it was like a really weird happenstance, and I didn't have the money to do it, and we played like in a really poor way, learn the game, and it only happened, I swear to God, it only happened because Tiger Woods was really starting to come on, and that changed. I was right at the beginning age wise of Tiger coming on, and that changed everything, because a decade later golf looked totally different in just 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I said the age gap thing, because when I was a kid, Tiger Woods hadn't started yet. All right, two more here. A word or phrase that people use that I can't stand is blank.
It's specifically because I got a 7-year-old right now, and he mimics everything his buddies do, and it drives me bananas, right? I love the kid to death, but he's got to stop mimicking his friends. And all these kids say brah, like BRAH, to adults. They do it to adults, and there's nothing that grinds the gears in me like it just when my kid, and I'm talking to him like, yo, you got to stop doing this. He's like, nah, brah. I just like my whole dude, my brain just like short circuits. I'm like, what did this fucking kid just say to me?
Yeah.
And like I have to like step away for a second. It drives me nuts.
My son calls me playa all the time. That's not my way.
You are a little bit of a playa. Yeah, he's older now.
Yeah, he is. He's 20 years old.
Yeah, you guys are buddies now. That's
he's basically an adult. I hate the word YOLO. No explanation really needed. I just that phrase. Dumb. That word annoys me. All right, last one here, and then we got to get out. An actor that played a role so well that you couldn't envision anyone else ever doing it is blank.
I am going to cheat out, and I'm going to actually give you two answers. One answer is a total cop-out. The first one is, and I think I've said it on this show before, the entire cast of every single one of the Harry Potter films.
I haven't watched them, so I can't.
Perfect all the way through. And if you haven't read the books, I say you read the books first and then watch the film, and it displayed exactly as I thought it would. And so I think that, but then if I just select one, I'm going Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. Like,
that's a good one.
Made for, I couldn't see anyone ever being Tony Stark.
My one, very popular guy, so no surprise, but James Gandolfini playing Tony Soprano. He played him so perfectly that I can't envision anyone else. Omar Little.
On
the Wire? Yeah, that was really good too.
Yeah, there's a few of those HBO ones that
for sure
nobody could replicate. Yeah, for sure. They do a great job.
All right, guys, we're gonna get out of here. Make sure you follow Aaron on Twitter at Aaron Quinn 716. Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Aaron and Greg every week. In fact, check out their whole stable of lineup, man. It's so good. If These Walls Could Talk, I see it all the time. People sleep on that show. I love that show, man. Love those guys, but anyway, man, thank you. Always appreciate having you on.
Love it, man. Thanks for having me on, dude.
All right, guys, and I will be back with a new episode on Friday. Talk to you then.